Welcome to Orbicle Times Podcast, and hello to everyone, whatever part of the globe you're from or happen to reside in. My name is Kelly Jo, and here we'll provide armchair conversations gathered from interviews and research reviews to explore the seen, the unseen, and the in-between of the supernatural paranormal phenomena, with topics that circle around spirit orbs, NDEs, OBEs, UFOs, time slips, mystical moments, higher consciousness, and more. I hope that this cast will be our meeting place and judge-free zone where we can explore, learn, and grow through the telling of. This cast will be launched on a monthly basis or a bi-weekly schedule whenever I'm able to make contact with those in the know for their telling of. Speaking of those in the know and the telling of, have you had mystical moments or other supernatural paranormal experiences? Care to share on this cast? Then consider stepping into the light with your telling of, or send in your monologue for me to read on this podcast. Simply email orbicletimespodcast@gmail.com for a chance to contribute to this cast.
As you were saying, there was no footsteps. And I remember being afraid, thinking, is somebody underneath the porch? This was around the time of the clown epidemic. If there's any millennials who listen to this, I don't know, but they would definitely remember the absolute hold that had on us. The doorbell rings, who knows what's going to happen, right? Could get crazy.
I have written and spoken about only a few of my supernatural, paranormal, UFO experiences, and it's inevitable that I seem to inject my daughter's name into the narrative, which had me thinking I should really have my daughter on the podcast. And so I asked her, and she agreed, and I'm glad she's here. Hi, Chloe. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, Mom. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, I'm so excited that you decided to share all your or some of your experiences anyways. Yeah, so it'll be up to you if you want to start off with your first memory of supernatural UFO experience. It's up to you.
Well, that's a great question. Where to start? You and I have had so many interesting experiences over our lifetimes, both together and separately.
Maybe the best thing, I think what I'm going to do, because this show tends to be based on orbs, that's sort of the foundation. So can I ask you if you can remember what your first sighting was of an orb?
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether that was something that you filmed in video or seeing a picture, let's say, of when we first moved into this house as an example.
So I think that my knowledge of orbs probably, yes, would have been when we first moved into the house that you still live in.
No.
That would have been in 2011. Mm-hmm. And I do remember us taking some pictures of the house, of my bedroom, different parts of the house, and having these sort of strange anomalies showing up in the photograph. And I don't think either of us at that point in time knew what those were. Now, that was something that obviously you couldn't see with the naked eye at that point in time. But that would have been my first experience with that.
From when we first moved in here, which you're right, it's about 15 years ago, of this super huge orb in the dining room. Before we had put our set in there, it was still a clear room. And also in your bedroom, when you were sitting at your desk in a few shots.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember that one, but
I do remember those ones.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's funny. We saw them. I think that we noted them, but we were like, okay, they're orbs. And then move on.
I don't even recall us thinking that they were orbs. I just remember us looking and going, oh, that's sort of weird. I wonder what happened with the camera there. And not really connecting the dots on that too much until years later. And looking at those photos and going, doesn't that kind of look like an orb? Like things that, they talk about on those TV shows and
probably some of those paranormal shows that we used to watch every now and then.
The Ghost Hunters and and I do remember having a friend who lived in the house with us.
And it wasn't an imaginary friend.
No. This was a to me a physical being. It wasn't. I never really had imaginary friends as a child. I had a great imagination. I was able to clearly draw the line between reality and what my fantasy worlds of my dolls and things were having their adventures. Yeah, I do remember having a friend. He was an adult man now. I think I was too young to really be able to get a good idea of how old he was, but I knew that he was an adult. And I can still recall him. He had a very calming, sort of paternal presence to me. He was dressed a red and black checkered shirt, almost what you would think of like a lumberjack would wear.
Yeah.
And he had, I want to say, blue overalls or blue jeans. And he had very dark, slicked back, like gelled back hair. And he was a white guy. And yeah, I just remember that he would play games with me, which was just, I was thrilled with. Didn't have that many playmates because we were sort of out in the country. So I was thrilled to have this visitor who would, come and, spend some time with me. He would play shop with me, was a game that we liked, where he would move my dresser out for me, pretend to be the shopkeeper and go back and forth like that. And that was pretty great for me as a kid. Got anything to add? Obviously, as an adult memory, you might have some more clarity than I would.
The first time that I can recall finding out about him, I remember sitting you up on the bed and you told me it was a man and you described him. And I said, I wasn't like, oh, you're just imagining this, Chloe. I remember being, okay, and what else can you tell me about him? I was getting the specifics from you. I believed you right away.
We were in the middle of a game of shop, actually, and then there was a sound at the door, and he looked over, and I looked over, and you came in, and yeah, just like what you're saying, I remember you picking me up and putting me on the bed, and I sort of looked around and went, I don't know where he is now, but he was here.
Right. I think that you were standing in front of your dresser,
yes,
playing with the toys, and you were describing, that he was there, that he was playing with you, that he would get over to the other side.
That's right. Yeah.
You were there was no reason for me then or later on to think, oh, this is just a playmate she's imagining. That's just not how you rolled.
No. And I do remember as well, being a 4-year-old girl, I didn't have that much strength. And I do remember one of the first things that you latched on to, looking at my dresser, which had been moved, he had moved it to walk behind it and saying, yes, what happened to your, asking me, like, did you move it? And
yes,
and me sort of thinking, well, of course I can't move it myself. That's not possible. But I do remember you being confused about that and wondering, how did you move that yourself?
Now, I can't recall if this happened before or after. I do remember whether I heard it and or sensed it at the same time. But I came into your room or at the doorway, and you were sitting on the floor with your back leaning on your bed, if you will, or the bed frame, and you had a hat on. You were playing, but you turned to me, and I could tell by your face like something was wrong. And I said, what just happened? And you said your school bag. Remember
that was an entirely different time. I think that was later on. It was probably months later. That was weird. I remember it was sitting, it was near the cupboard, but it was on the wall, just beside the cupboard, just leaning against it, and I was sitting, I think up against my bed, and all of a sudden it was a very strange way that it moved. It suddenly went down on a 90-degree angle, so it was leaning on its rest, I guess. The bottom of it was against the ground, and then it suddenly did a 90-degree flop onto its face, and then it was there for maybe half a second, and then it went across the floor a good probably 2 or 3 feet.
Yes.
Almost, in a straight line, perfectly straight line. But what was interesting was it didn't fall and go. It fell onto its face. It was still for a moment, and then it moved. And I remember being terrified of that.
Yeah, it's funny because almost running to your room, again, I don't recall if I heard it, like go across the rug, or if I just sensed there's something up. I really don't. Yeah, I cannot recall that. But you also, I don't know if you were just in shock, but you didn't, get up, run to me. You were crying. You didn't scream. I just said, what's happened? And then you told me. And then I guess we chatted about it and like that. I know that I can recall one other incident, and that is when you had come into our bed, mine and your father's, and, it was early in the morning and you had woken up and you wanted to get active, and we were, just waking up. And I remember opening my eyes and looking at you and going, what's the matter? Or what's wrong? Well, if you recall that, you can take it from there, because you said to me, what I recall is you said, "Mummy, there's a man." I remember that.
Yes, yes. So this was one of the only negative experiences that I had with the man in the house, in that house. And that was, yeah, I had gotten into bed and I was laying in between you and Dad. I looked over and the bed was not across from the door, but it was so that the head of the bed was facing the door, which
That's
is
right.
on the third wall over. If you were at the head of the bed and looked directly down, you would see a wall, and then a little bit to the right, there was the door.
Right.
So I remember looking over and seeing the man in the house. Unmistakably, it was him. It was the same, height, weight, age, clothing, everything. The only thing that was different about him was that now, rather than being a physical person, as I'd always thought that he always appeared solid to me, he was transparent. So I could see him, but I could also see through him. And I recall that being disturbing to me because I didn't understand any of, and I remember the expression on his face was very dark. And I remember being afraid of him, but not for myself, but for you and Dad, because I knew instinctively that he wanted to do you and Dad harm, because he had told me, "Oh, your mom and your dad are bad. They're no good. I don't like them. I don't want them here. I like you. You're a very good girl." These kinds of things. And I remember watching you two with a very dark and malignant expression on his face.
Yeah, that's terrifying. I do remember speaking with you at that moment. In detail. You were giving me information. You also described that he wore to hold up his pants, which would make sense back in the day.
Suspenders, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that must be. I knew he was wearing blue jeans, and I couldn't remember if he was wearing overalls or somebody. Must have been suspenders then. I guess as 2 decades has gone by, my memory's faded on that particular detail.
Yeah, we don't rehash this, very much, this story. So it's an interesting information that you give about him not liking us, which sort of ties into, and I'm not really going to talk about this too much because this is me interviewing you, but it does, I think, play into the fact of, in that same room, when I had out-of-body experience, and I could see myself in bed when I was up in the corner of the ceiling. And the thing that shot me back into my body was the thought that I can't be out of here. Somebody might take over my body. Now, at that time, I had no reason to have that thought, first of all. I wasn't reading up on that kind of stuff. I mean, we just had other things going on.
And that does track, I think, very well, because the overall impression from him that I got as a child, and looking back, I understand now how it was a bit more sinister, but was him wanting me, or wanting to be the caretaker figure in my life.
Did he ever tell you his name?
No, he did not. Or if he did, I can't remember that.
Did you get the impression that he was from that house?
Well, that's sort of a good question. I didn't get the feeling that he was coming and going. It was something that he seemed intrinsically linked to that particular place. He didn't come with me to school, or I never saw him out in the backyard or front yard or anything like that. It was always the house was the only place that I had any sort of interaction with him.
Now, what's interesting about this story is that now when my mom came to visit at that same house, I'll just quickly sort of insert here, in a round circle. And at that time, I had no idea what she was talking about. And she said she saw him in the waking state while I was conversing with her. He was in back of me. She didn't tell me that while it was happening. She left that to herself. She only told me that after another incident occurred for her. And that incident is when she woke up from a sleep and she was, yelling or startled or whatever. She told me that a man came to her in a dream. He had greased back hair. He was wearing suspenders, and that he was crying out for help. And she woke up in a state, I think there's somebody here that needs help. And in the end, she said, I told her about what had happened to you.
Yes.
And then she told me okay, I wasn't going to tell you, but while I was speaking with you the other day, I saw this face in a round, she called it a round circle. It wasn't, I saw him in a spirit orb. It was just, he came in a round circle. That was pretty interesting for me because I thought, okay, I didn't tell her. And she was at that time going, I'm seeing something, but I'm not going to tell her. She'll think I'm crazy, And I think it was the greased back hair and the clothes that he was wearing that I thought, okay, something is definitely going on if she is dreaming and seeing. And you are also describing the same individual without the two of you, knowing each other's experience.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Coincidence? I think not. Chloe, you want to talk about your UFO sightings or, encounter sightings that you had? I believe that you had one.
Just one. Not as many as you, I think. No, that was the time that I saw something in the sky with you, and that was in the house that you currently live in.
Yeah.
And we were sitting on the porch. One of us saw something. I can't remember if it was you or me who first saw it, but we saw something in the sky further down the street. We walked down from the porch down into the street, and we're standing in the street and looking up at this strange silvery bright thing. I don't know what it was. It was just, it seemed sort of far away-ish, and it was in the mid of the sky, I believe. Now, it wasn't a sundog or anything of that nature, because the sun was behind us, I believe.
Yep.
So it wasn't something that was glancing off of the sun or its lights, and there was no high rises or anything like that would be causing that. It's a pretty flat and not that built up area, or at least it was at that point in time. And I remember being really confused about what it was and wanting to go and see it and think, what is that? And like, I'm gonna go see what that is. And you were like, no, don't go see what that is. Just kind of forget about it. It's nothing. Go back in the house, was what you told me.
Correct. Yes. And it's interesting. First of all, this was a number of years ago. I can't remember the exact year, but I'm going to put a time frame in of, let's say, between, I don't know, like 7 to 10 years ago. Maybe I'm off, but
I think I was in high school at that point in time.
Okay.
So that would be anywhere between 2011 and 2015.
So that's sort of the time frame. And I do remember that we were on the porch, and I do remember seeing it from my peripheral vision on the right-hand side, which would have been the east of our street where we are, where I am, sorry. And that, you walked down and I walked down. You said, Mom, come and look. We walked out into the street, and I remember looking around to see if anybody else, is there anybody else here out on the street that can validate what is this thing that we're looking at? And I do remember you wanting to go and walk and get closer to it. And I think I've already stated this or written about this, that I was curt with you. And I was like, no, we've got to eat supper or something along those lines, because I couldn't see walking towards something that I didn't feel good about. And I don't know why I didn't feel good about it, because it didn't register to me what exactly it was, except I know that memory can be a funny thing. And I know that distance is very hard to describe or calculate. And to me, I don't remember having to lift my head up to look at it. Do you know what I mean?
Because it was far enough away that it was...
But in my mind, it wasn't far away. It wasn't like a teeny tiny dot way down blocks and blocks away. That's in my memory, that it was quite I'm going to say a round object, but it didn't have a definition. There wasn't like, oh, look, you can see the circle. You know exactly that that's a sphere. It's like the sun. You see the illumination from the sun. That's you know that it's a circle. And I'd say it was hovering. There wasn't really movement to it that I remember. That, I'm going back many years. And I don't know what it was. Here's what I found interesting. After the event happened, you went in, I went in. How many times did we talk about it? Not
very much, I don't think.
I remember in all of these years, maybe a total of like, handful of times, like years in between as well.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's because we've just had collectively so many strange things happen to us that, I mean, for myself, I sort of brushed it off as, yeah, okay, whatever, like, I wasn't seeing see-through people or, seeing these crazy things flying around in the air or anything like that. So for me, on my list of strange things that have happened, it ranks very, very low.
And that's an interesting point, because I've always, and I don't know why, I've always believed in UFOs. I don't know why. I just have. They're not like really high up there on the list. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I find it interesting. There might be a connection between seeing them and maybe other events, but maybe not. Other things have happened. So I don't know if we have time possibly to talk about a kind of a fun little event that happened, an experience that we both had in this house when you were living here. If my memory is correct, but you can clarify for me. Your memory is probably still clear, I'd say, about this event. That's the time that we were in the hallway downstairs, and you were standing on the step that goes up to the second floor, and I was in the hallway, and if I was to reach out with both arms, my left arm could probably touch you, and possibly my right arm would have been very close to our front door. And while we were there and I was talking, the doorbell rang, and we looked at each other going, who would? It was a step maybe that I had to take. The dog did not bark. That was another interesting thing. And I didn't hear anybody come up on the veranda. Usually, because it's wood and so are the steps, we would have heard somebody, but we didn't. So anyways, I opened the door and there was nobody there. And I looked at you, and you had come off the steps by then. It was like, who's here at this hour of the night? I mean, it wasn't that late, but it was probably, I'm feeling it was like 9:30 or something like that.
Yeah.
Opened the door. There was nobody there. We were mystified. And then we smelled tobacco. It smelled to me like pipe smoke. And then we started looking around the property. Somebody was here. The doorbell rang. We can smell the pipe smoke. Who the heck? Where did they go? There was nobody on the street. We would have seen if there was somebody there, had they ran away, or even heard if they had to go back down the steps, which we didn't. And then I think we sort of both got into a little panic and wondered if there was somebody around the house. Do you remember that?
Yes. Yeah, so I have the same memory as you, coming out onto the porch and smelling, very strong smoke, thinking, well, it couldn't have been a glitch in the doorbell function, because there obviously was somebody here. Nobody in our house smokes, and there was nobody outside on any of their porches across the street, smoking. And it was so heavy and strong that it must have been immediately present. And looking around, and I think at that point, I don't think Dad was home. So
he was not. No,
yeah, right.
Correct.
So I started to feel kind of scared because, as you were saying, there was no footsteps. And I remember being afraid, thinking, is somebody underneath the porch? Is somebody hiding under the car, like underneath our car?
You were afraid. Yeah.
Does somebody want to try to, because you hear things, and I think this was around the time of the clown epidemic. So my millennials will probably, if there's any millennials who listen to this, I don't know, but they would definitely remember the absolute hold that had on us. If the doorbell rings, like, who knows what's going to happen, right? Could get crazy. But it didn't. It was just really weird. We walked outside, we looked around, like you said, and then I think I looked over, and our neighbors to the left of us had just gotten this new kitten. They never let that thing out of the house, which good, perfect. But it was outside for some reason, and it was sort of weird that I noticed that and thought, what is this cat doing out here? Like, the weird, but okay, we're out here anyways. So walking over, scooping it up because it was so small, and going to our neighbor, knocking on the door and saying, like, hey, did you like leave your cat out or something? And he was confused and was like, how did you get my cat? Like, I don't let it outside. I haven't been outside, and giving it to him, and then saying, By the way, did you happen to come out and knock on our door or ring the doorbell or something like that? Or were you outside? Weird question, unrelated to your cat, but were you outside just recently? And he was like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. Give me my cat, please. And then shutting the door.
That's right. That's
and
right.
I think the only reason I asked him that was because he smoked, or we asked him that was because I think he did smoke, if memory serves me right.
He did, and I don't remember the fragrance being tobacco smoke. I remember it, for me, being pipe smoke.
I couldn't tell you the difference between. I just knew it was smoke.
It was smoke, yeah, definitely. Thinking that perhaps it was him that came over. Maybe he was looking for his cat.
Yeah, something like that.
or something like that. Now I'm going to say that I wonder if that doorbell rang in order for somebody to find that little fur ball. Remember, it was all in a circle, just
cold,
cold, and it was so tiny.
Yeah,
I don't know how old it was, but it was so tiny.
Yeah, you could just hold it in one hand.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that was kind of strange. I mean, again, it was sort of one of those things that didn't really rank too high for me on the scale of weird things that I've encountered, but it was a little weird.
It was a little weird. It was kind of a sort of a fun.
The cat got back inside for sure, because I probably would have.
All's well that ends well, I guess.
Yeah.
So some of these events you've already mentioned, they're not high up there on the scale of weird things. Do you want to come back maybe in the future to talk about some of the events that are high up on the scale for you?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to do that, Mom.
Okay, that would be great, Chloe. One in particular, don't know if this is high on your list or not, was when we both went to the Ottawa Old Jail.
Yes.
Was that one? Does that fall somewhere in the middle?
I would say that's pretty mid for me. That's up there.
Okay. Well, then we will meet again over the airwaves and talk about some of your mid to high encounters if you want to.
Alrighty. Well, thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much for being here, Chloe. All right. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I would like to keep this cast a commercial-free zone. In light of that, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channels. All my orb videos are available by using the handle @SpiritOrbSightings, or visit my new channel with the handle @Orbicle Times Podcast. If you've already subscribed, many thanks. For blogs, episodes, show notes, bios, images, and video, please visit www.orbicletimes.com. If you enjoyed an episode, then please give a like or a share on Anchor, Spotify, Apple, or whatever podcatcher you happen to use. If you've already done so, much appreciated. Thank you for taking your time to visit these Orbicle Times. Orbicle Times Podcast is written, produced, edited, and hosted by me, Kelly Jo, at Studio Spare Room.